Assalamualaikum. Alright, so in this video we are going to cover chapter 2, financial reporting and analysis. Alright, so let's have a look what we have here. Okay, so we are going to look at the types of financial statements. Okay, so here you can see, alright, 4 types of financial statements. So number 1, statement of financial position, which is balance sheet. Okay, we want to look at the position of the company in terms of their assets, liabilities and equities. And then number 2, the statement of financial performance. So to measure the performance, we are going to look at the profit and loss account. Okay, statement of shareholders' equity and also the statement of the cash flows. Alright, so we are going to look at the interrelationship, okay, between these 4 types of financial statements. Alright, so let's go one by one. Number 1, statement of financial positions or the balance sheet. So I'm sure you are already familiar with the balance sheets. Okay, the look like is T account. So on the left hand side we have the assets, on the right hand side we have the liabilities and also the equities. Okay, so basically macam ni lah bentuk dia. Okay, the balance sheet. Alright, so let's have a look at the item one by one. Okay, assets. Okay, what are assets? Okay, so assets represent the resources, okay, that business owns. Alright, so this is the keyword, business owns or control, okay, at a given point in time. This includes items such as cash, inventory, machinery and buildings. Okay, so mestilah dia owns and have controls over the asset. Baru kita panggil assets. Kalau tak ada control over it, itu bukan asset lah. Okay, so for the assets, so basically ada 2 types of assets. So it's current assets and the non-current asset. Okay. And then next, let's have a look at the liabilities. Okay, so liabilities represent the obligations, okay, which must be paid back. Okay, so ini kind of hutang lah, so mesti dibayar balik. So liabilities pun are 2 types of liabilities, a current liability, okay, and also the non-current liability. Okay, so for the current liability ni, okay, for the maturity that is less than 1 year. Okay, for the non-current, ni non-current liability, for the maturity that is more than 1 year. Okay, and then the equity ni capital lah. Okay, the capital, okay, capital, alright, represents the value of money that the owners have contributed to the business, including retained earning, which is the profit made in the previous year. So, macam saya cakap tadi, it is basically a capital. It could be in term of the common stock, okay, preferred stock, okay, and then sometimes there is a retained earning, okay, which is the accumulated profit, okay, from year to year. Alright, so as you can see, the statement of financial position ataupun the balance sheets is derived from the accounting equation. Okay, that is assets is equal to liabilities plus shareholders equity. Alright, so ni, okay, the first column is the assets, okay, which comprise of current assets, non-current asset, and another one intangible assets. So I forgot to mention before. So intangible asset ni is kind of investment of a company. Contohnya macam yang ni, goodwill, alright, patent, okay. So itu contoh intangible assets. And then liabilities, we have the current liabilities, non-current liabilities, and the equity. The share capital if the company issue common stock, and the preferred stock, and also the retained earnings. Alright, so now let's have a look at the types of assets. Alright, so ini types of asset. The first one is the current assets. Okay, so the current asset ni the maturity ataupun due within a year lah. Okay, so that's why kita panggil the current assets. Okay, so this susunan ni is according to their liquidity, which is how fast they can be turned into cash. So number 1 is cash. Okay, so the very quickly one ataupun the is is a cash, alright? So other than that, that is very quickly can be turned into cash, like bills, coins, bank balance, money order and checks. And then number 2 is marketable securities, also liquid financial instrument, okay, that can be quickly converted into cash. And then the account receivable, okay, account receivable maksudnya yang akan diterima, okay. So this is the amount owed by a company. So kita resulting from a company providing goods and services on credit. So we sell on credit, and then our customer, okay, owe us money. So that is the account receivables. And then the inventory. So this is our stocks. Okay. So stocks ni pun is assets that intended to be held for sale. So, kita akan jual nanti. Okay, the ordinary course of business. And then the other current assets like the prepaid expenses, ini the expenses that we pay in advance, ataupun the accrued revenue. Okay, so the accrued revenue ni maksudnya the revenue earned but not yet received. Maksudnya in the statement is stated as the transaction is happened, but the really cash is not really received by the company. And then next is types of non-current asset like building, motor vehicles, equipment, premises. So yang ini pun kadang sometimes orang panggil dia fixed assets, right? Okay, and then types of intangible assets. Okay, so this kind of asset that has no physical presence, intangible, cannot be touched, right? So ini contoh dia macam goodwill, patent, copyright. So it is more like an investment. Okay, investment in this company. Alright, now the liabilities and equity. Okay, liabilities. Okay, what are liabilities? So liabilities are legally binding obligation that are payable to another person or entity. Okay, so this is basically what the company owe. Okay, hutang. Okay, so the liabilities, okay, can be categorized into two, the current liabilities and the non-current, as I mentioned before. So the current liabilities and obligation that will be due within 1 year, within or less than 1 year. So this is a cut-off point here, less than 1 year lah ataupun within 1 year. Okay, and then the non-current liabilities are those obligations not due for settlement within 1 year ataupun more than 1 year, due more than 1 year. So kita akan categorize it as the non-current liabilities. Alright, so equity pula macam tadilah sama, the net amount of funds invested in a business by its owner plus any retained earnings. So yang ni capital lah, capital like common share, preferred share, and also the retained earnings. Alright, now so let's continue with the types of liabilities. So as mentioned before, we have two types of liabilities, okay, which is current liabilities and also non-current liabilities. Alright, so the current liabilities, okay, are the liabilities that are due in less than a year. Okay, less than a year ataupun 1 year. Okay, so the cut-off point is 1 year. Okay, so less than 1 year is current liability, and then for the liability for maturity more than 1 year, so it's called as a non-current liability. Okay, so this one is more than a year. Alright, so types of current liability that has the maturity less than a year. Okay, including account payables, okay, which is the amount owed to a supplier. So because we buy in credit, okay, so that's why we have to pay to the supplier or vendor for goods or services provided, okay, in advance of payment. And then accruals, okay, dalam bahasa Melayunya ni tunggakan. So and accrued expenses. Alright, so accrued expenses is the expenses incurred but not yet paid. Alright, and or revenue received in advance. Okay, so the revenue received in advance ni maksudnya the revenue received but not yet earned. So for example, the tenant, okay, bayar rental sepatutnya sampai bulan 12 tapi dia bayar sampai bulan 3 tahun depan. Okay, so we receive in advance, so it become our liability. Alright. And then the notes payable is a liability in writing that promise to pay a specific amount of money at future date or demand. So ini the short term loan lah ni. Okay, and then the last one is the deferred tax, that is tax assessed or due for the current period but has not yet been paid. So this one is basically the tax for this year, but normally will be paid in the next year. Alright. Okay, next, the types of non-current liabilities which have the maturity more than a year. So basically this one is the long-term liabilities lah. Okay, like a long-term loan, debentures, mortgages and etc. Okay, dan dekat sini pun kita letak terus the types of equity. So yang ini pun dah mention just now, the share capital, money money raised by issuing common stock or preferred stock. So ini common stock, preferred stock, and also the retained earnings. Okay, that is the accumulated profits from year to year. Alright, next, so this is the example of the statement of financial position ataupun the balance sheets. Okay, maybe kecil je ni. Just nak show you the example of the balance sheet. Okay, so this is ABC Corporation. Okay, the balance sheet December 31st, so RM in millions. So stated in the balance sheet like macam yang kita cover tadi, must be assets, the current. Okay, and then non-current assets. Okay, and then ada liabilities, which is current liabilities, non-current liabilities, and then equities. Alright. Okay, so this is only the example. Okay, and then next, okay, the last item of the financial statement of financial position. Okay, off balance sheet financing. Nama dia pun off. Okay, maksudnya dia tak ada dalam balance sheet but only appear in the disposure saja. Dia ada dalam disposure. Alright. So a form of financing in which large capital expenditures are capped off. Capped off maksudnya tak diletakkan on the company balance sheet through various classification methods. So companies will often use off balance sheet financing to keep their debt to equity and leverage ratios low. So dia tak tunjuk semua lah, tapi dia letak dalam disposure. Dalam financial statement itself tak ada. Okay, especially if the inclusion of a large expenditure would break negative debt covenant. So the debt covenant ni represent in term of macam adalah clause in the loan agreement in which borrower guarantees to comply, okay, ataupun represent in term of the financial ratio that the company must be maintain. Okay, like the company must maintain the low debt to equity ratio. Okay, so contrast to loan, debt and equity in which do appear in the balance sheet. Example of the off-balance sheet financing, macam joint venture, R&D, partnership and operating leases. And then operating leases are one of the most common form of off-balance sheet financing. Okay, so in these cases, the asset itself is kept on the lessor balance sheet, and the lessee reports only the required rental expense for the use of the asset. Okay, so this one is only for your additional information lah. So we are not going to go through this one in depth. Alright, so I think that's all for this video for the statement of financial position, and then in the next video we are going to cover the statement of financial performance.